The country earlier announced yet another record number of COVID deaths, more than 1,000 a day. A Brazilian Senate committee is expected to recommend charging President Jair Bolsonaro for serious offences over his handling of the COVID crisis. The pandemic has killed more than 500,000 people in Brazil. Kenya has lifted a nationwide coronavirus curfew that had been in place for more than a year and a half. President Uhuru Kenyatta said easing the restrictions was possible because of the progress the country had made in fighting the pandemic. At least 27 people have been killed in 2 attacks in Syria. 14 died when a bomb exploded in Damascus. The attack was the deadliest the capital has seen in many years. The capital of the northern Ethiopian region of Tigray is said to have been targeted in an airstrike. The Ethiopian government carried out 2 similar strikes on Monday as part of the year-long conflict with the regional authorities. Russia has called on the Taliban to live up to international expectations on human rights if it wants to be recognised. It also urged the UN to call a donors' conference to discuss ways of assisting Afghanistan. Facebook has been fined almost $70 million by the British authorities. They said the company had repeatedly and deliberately breached an order to supply information about its takeover of a graphics startup. Facebook described the fine as unfair. BBC News.
This is World Business Report from the BBC World Service. Hello, I'm Mike Johnson. Welcome to the programme. Coming up, the challenge ahead for Brazil and its people battered by the pandemic. We hear how Latin America's biggest economy is faring as a parliamentary committee calls for President Jair Bolsonaro to face criminal charges for his handling of the virus. Also on the way, a ticking time bomb in the Red Sea. Things are getting desperate on a rusting oil tanker, which could trigger an environmental and humanitarian disaster.
The ship moves forward each day towards the worst. Science, mind, logic, experience all confirm that disaster is imminent. But when it will exactly happen, Allah only knows.
And we'll have the latest as the world's biggest book fair opens in Frankfurt. All of that on the way over the next half an hour. The pandemic has claimed the lives of more than 600,000 people in Brazil. Only the United States has suffered a higher death toll. Now a committee of the Brazilian Congress has recommended that President Jair Bolsonaro face criminal charges, including crimes against humanity, for his management of the crisis. The panel believes the president intentionally let the virus spread through the country in a failed bid to achieve herd immunity and spare the economy from the impact of lockdown. The verdict follows 6 months of hearings with emotional statements from witnesses. Among those who gave evidence to the committee's inquiry was Marcio G. Nascimento. He's a taxi driver who lost his son to the virus last year.
I
think we deserve an apology from the highest authority in the country. This is not about politics. It's not about belonging to one party or another. We're talking about people's lives.
Política, se é de partido, se é de outro. Nós estamos falando de vidas.
Well, the inquiry itself doesn't have the power to bring any charges. President Bolsonaro has enough support within the National Congress to avoid being forcibly removed from office. But the verdict is damning as the president prepares to seek re-election next year. He now wants to launch a new programme of aid for Brazil's poorest families. An expected announcement about that due on Thursday has been cancelled. Financial markets have been nervous about the impact of more spending on government finances, with the Brazilian currency, the real, weakening as a result. President Bolsonaro's approach has been to try to keep the economy as open as possible during the pandemic. I asked the Brazilian economist Daniel Duque about the impact of that.
In 2020, GDP dropped by like 4%, so it had like a huge impact, but not as much as first expected. Mainly due to the emergency aid, like we had like this huge fiscal impulse by the direct transfers to families, so it helped to maintain a certain level of activity. The recovery was at a good pace by the first semester of this year, but then we it slowed down quite a lot, and now we're kind of in a stagnated economy. Like we're not recovering anymore. Problems with energy supply.
And where are we on this latest attempted fiscal stimulus? It was supposed to have been announced on Thursday, I believe, but the announcement's been cancelled. This is giving handouts of around $70 to the poorest households, but that announcement has been cancelled. Some financial market concerns impact on the currency, on how that might hurt Brazilian government finances, I think.
Yeah, exactly. The government fiscal situation is not good, like since the early 2010s. So we had now this spending ceiling. The government can increase the spending above inflation rates, but the government has been trying to approve this new expenditure on the transfers to families, to poor families, trying to make it like a part of it under this spending ceiling and another part out of this rule, this fiscal rule. So it's been a debate inside the government, like with the finance minister Paulo Guedes against this kind of this attempt. But the president is mostly convinced and mostly willing to approve this new fiscal stimulus that would last at least until the end of 2022. That is the year that Bolsonaro is running for his re-election.
So this extra money will still go through, even though this announcement has been called off, you feel?
Bolsonaro is definitely convinced the government should approve this new program.
And what do Brazilians think about President Bolsonaro's handling of the economy and obviously the pandemic? His approval ratings, I think, have been weak, haven't they?
Yeah, by now his approval rates that dropped steadily after 2020. During the most of the pandemic, while we had like this huge emergency aid during the year of 2020, his approval rates were actually increasing because the poorest were having more money than they used to have because it was like this huge transfer to families. But after 2020, his approval rates they dropped quite a lot after the end of the size of the drop of the size of this fiscal stimulus, and now he's in his lowest rates since June or May. And also that we have like this Congress inquiry of the COVID handling from the government that has been showing that the government, Bolsonaro himself, was ignoring Pfizer's emails on the